come a kind of a month that the central government would not allow any Hollywood blockbuster to come into China to protect the national film industry. So now you can see when you come to China right now, you can see the Spider-Man, Batman, all these kind of blockbusters fight each other because we have this national cinema protectionist policy which respond to this global local resistance. And the third and the fourth layers would be government-sponsored charm campaign and also grassroots initiatives. As I just already mentioned, that the charm campaign become a government-sponsored project, whereas we still have this netizen or a more grassroots level of forces to initiate more international campaign. So I would use two words to kind of try to characterize what is really this Chinese model of media or journalism practice. The first term I would use the administered liberalization. Of course, you can see the liberalization of media in China, but it's still administered by either the central government forces or I would use the main ideological forces. The second would be the opening up of niche market. Of course, like I just mentioned, news media, television, internet, all kinds of different media now all prospering in China. Of course, they are oriented different segment of population, like oldies, like youngsters, like digital immigrant or digital natives, and so on and so forth. But I have to also mention that there is a very conspicuous weakness. Even Chinese government spend billions of dollars for this charm campaign, but obviously the downside or the ineffective communication of this charm campaign is there. I would rather say it has the four layers of this influence. The first is that the current charm campaign in China highlight the West, neglect the rest, including Africa. And the second is the highlighting the government-sponsored project and neglecting the interactions with local communities. Because most of the campaigns is rather government-sponsored, like Confucius Institute would be a typical example. But they use the forces of the citizen journalism, for instance, and also the interaction with the local communities like the African common people. The third aspect would highlight the spectacle. For example, we have Olympics, we have the World Expo, we have always mega events that highlight China's economic miracles in the past years. But when it comes to some crises, especially some scandals, either political scandals or economic scandals, the Chinese journalism communication still fail to have this discursive power to articulate the transformation in China. The more recent example would be the political scandal involving one of our high elite wives' murder, a British businessman. Many of you might have heard of from the international media. The fourth aspect would be highlighting the old media. For example, now our investment from the government to promoting the international media outlet is still concentrated on old media. For example, People's Daily, CCTV, they got most of the funding to promote their international influence across the world. Whereas the new media, for instance, like the Chinese netizens, journalists, or Chinese website, or all these social media that you might heard that we have very typical social media called Weibo or microblog in China, which is very prospering. They lack the funding from the government to promote their influence across the world. This is an example that I intentionally used the word from Asia, although many of you might be familiar with some of the protests against China in recent years because of the lack of communication and the lack of the soft power and lack of understanding with the local community. But I want to offer two examples from our neighbors in Asia. One is Vietnam. In last year and this year, we have very massive demonstration against China's so-called penetration into Vietnam. Especially all those participants would be young generation, which is defined as digital natives. The digital generation would be the main force of misunderstanding what is China is going on right now, especially in their relation with Vietnam. And also Philippines would be another example. They would say stand up against China's bullying. They was kind of mobilizing the young generation to to kind of resist against this China's so-called penetration of or China's rise. I would rather, as a conclusion, very quick conclusion, to give you some of my thoughts on the future directions of innovating international journalism in China. Because now we all know China's Charm Campaign is a grand project. We have money, we have personnel, we have all these resources we need actually to initiate this kind of campaign. But still we have to reorient our future development in the aspect of innovating international journalism. The first is I would say we should looking east and southbound, and rather than just looking west. Just like I said, the rest, look at the rest, or especially all these communities in the underdeveloped areas like in Africa and also South Asian communities I just mentioned a few minutes ago. So we would rather develop this international journalism campaign as a real communication order with the global vision in truth, and not with the Western or Euro-American vision, but with a truly defined global vision by knowing the non-Western world. The second direction will be looking down. Just like I said, most of our campaign so far was like officially sponsored, government supported. Many of you might be familiar with the Confucius Institute. I just saw immediate example that this conference was supported by the Embassy of People's Republic of China in the final page of our handbook of conference. I still find it's a little bit weird, because as a China, we should have some grassroots organization which also has the connection with big event like this. So my argument is still that we should strengthening netizen-based journalism and also promoting citizen heroes in China, rather than just promote those officially grand event like Olympics or World Expo, but we should need some interactions with the local communities and also netizen stratum of society. The third one will be looking forward. Of course, we should adopting social media as a central platform. Recently, many people ask me about whether you can serve Facebook and Twitter in China. My answer is still no, because Facebook and Twitter were still not allowed in China. We have our own version of Facebook and Twitter. Like I just mentioned, the microblog, the Weibo would be the alternative for Twitter in China. But in the future, I think social media as the emerging global media platform, especially for the generation of digital native, I still think in China we should have this kind of ideological forces to promote the social media as the one of the major platform for our international charm campaign. So this is it. I hope, I'm sorry that to move all the panelists away from my presentation. I apologize for that. Now back to our point. Thank you very much.
Okay. Yeah. I think you forgot your fantastic iPad here. Thank you for moving my panel away and bringing them back. I hope that we're going to. So let's quickly move to. I think that was fascinating conversation of the contradiction again. I think we usually know of China's patches of oil, energy, and other things, but no Twitter, which is available in Swaziland, you know, and no Facebook. So there is a widening democratic deficit in the country, in the presence of a massive economic growth trajectory. So we need to have that in the question and answer session. Let's go to another country that is also going to be given as an example, which is India, a huge, massive economy, you know, 1.7 trillion GDP is the size of India, the world's largest democracy, they say, but also a country with tremendous internal contradictions, very, very active in mineral sector in Africa, as well as in manufacturing. Mahindra, Tata, and other brands of India are coming in here. And many people are going to learn IT skills in Bangalore. So I think we will have a very good presentation from Vipul Mudgal on India.
Hello, everybody. Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity, the organizers, to share my thoughts with this August gathering of media from across Africa and rest of the world. I am going to talk about India. Obviously, I'm going to talk about certain problems that we are facing, certain things that we have which probably are examples, which are almost cautions for others. it's very easy to hail India. We all hail India. We talk about numbers, talk about anything. How many people educated? How many people going to schools? 12 crores, which is 120 million between the age group of 6 and 14. How many midday meals are being served? Everything is millions, billions. And we get completely overawed by that. As we were coming from Port Elizabeth to this town, we saw just about 200, 300 cars and about maybe 50, 60 people on the way. If I exclude those who were working on road construction, if you had covered this kind of distance in India, you would have seen, if not a million, about 300, 400, 500,000 people on both sides of the road. There'll be villages, there'll be, yeah, I mean, it's like very different. And when we talk about numbers, India works very differently. But at the same time, I want to talk about, of course, it is all fine, the changing global order. We are talking about the engines of growth, India, Brazil, China, Russia, South Africa. But there are some cautions. And one of them, the big number that we talk about for a long time, is the GDP growth rate. India is hailed. We all do that. Outsiders do that. And as an example, we are presented to the rest of the world, particularly to Africa, that if your growth rate is good, everything is fine. But look at those numbers. Behind those numbers, you see the ILO's latest report, Global Employment Trends 2012, and you will realize that the growth rate in India has been largely jobless in the last 4 or 5 years. Largely jobless, which means the companies are improving their productivity, but they are not expanding employment opportunities. There is a problem there. Now, I'm going to talk about, and this is a caution, with this, I'm going to talk about 3 things. One is development versus displacement that is going on, and of course, the role of the media there. Very briefly about issues of migration and urbanization, issues of agrarian crisis in India, and of course, some positive story, what democracy brings to a country which is the size of a continent. Now, the first thing, as we speak now, there is a state in the central India. It is called Madhya Pradesh, in which there is a district called Khandwa, a very backward district. As we speak, there is a protest going on there. The height of a dam is being increased from 189 meters to 193 meters, which is going to submerge 30 more villages involving about 52,000 people. In fact, the last update I got on that was this morning, that people are actually standing submerged in water, and they are saying that you cannot take away our land, you cannot inundate our villages and our farms without giving us a proper compensation or rehabilitation package. Now, what is the media doing in this? Of course, this is being reported, not as much as probably civil society movements and people would like to see, but media are reporting it. But we see there are, to make the picture clear, we have about 3,600 dams, and about 700 dams are still under construction. This is just the dams. Then there are cantonments coming up, there are field fighting ranges coming up, there are tiger reserves, 32 of them. There are wildlife sanctuaries, there are national parks, there are industries, there are elephant corridors. You know, all kinds of things are coming up, and each one of them is actually displacing people from their livelihoods and from their villages. So what do we see when media covers these issues? Normally we see words like wasteland. Now, wasteland is a very typically Western construct. Now, my friend also talked about a non-Western global vision, Professor Shi from China. It's like we look at the media in India somehow has been obsessed with looking at our country as our perhaps future is some countries yesterday. My tomorrow is their yesterday. Like we are catching up with the West, and that is modernization and that is development for us. So like the British did when in the colonial times, a lot of village commons, a lot of wetlands, and a lot of places which are of extreme importance to people for the village ecology, for the environment, and for livelihoods, are called the commons, and they were described as wastelands. Now the government still has an interest in describing a lot of forests, scrub forests, ecologically important areas, commons, as wasteland. And media very often falls in that trap. Very often, I mean, there is no doubt that Indian media also reports the opposite, and which is the saving grace. And we see, I'll come to that later, that apart from the fact that we have a very big national media, a thriving English press, we also have 25 languages and media, regional media in those languages has been reporting, and a lot of diversity and pluralism that you see also come across there. But the English media sets the tone. So we write words like wasteland for productive and extremely environmentally important village commons. We also use the word policy paralysis. You know, when we are not following the Western reform package, the package of modernization, liberalization, privatization, and globalization, if you are not following that package very closely, if you are not bringing in pro-labor policy, pro-industry labor policies, which are actually not pro-people, if you're not doing that, then it is called policy paralysis. And if you're doing the opposite of it, then there is a very good chance that the word like fiscal prudence or good governance will be used by the English media. Fortunately, as I said, that the regional media is not so bad. There is a plurality even within this English media in India. But this is happening a lot. And now, I need to move to the next point, because we can continue to talk about this displacement point. This is one of the biggest points. This is in the areas where Maoists are active in India, which the Indian government describes as India's biggest internal security threat. In the same way as in the McCarthy days, you know, the American establishment described the African-American rising as the biggest threat against America. So that's like displacement. The agrarian distress in a country of India's size, we have 40% of our farmers saying that they would do something else. Farming is not profitable. A farmer is committing suicide every 30 minutes. That is 40.